Why one number keeps appearing in your dreams, night after night. You wake up at 4:44 again, not for the first time this month. In the dream, a door had that number on it, or a clock, or a page torn from a book you have never owned. You tell yourself it was just your mind replaying something from the day. But you cannot remember seeing that number anywhere while you were awake, and it keeps returning, night after night, in dreams that share nothing else in common. You have started to dread checking the clock the moment you open your eyes, because some part of you already expects to find it there too. Here is the first answer, stated plainly. A repeating number in your dreams is not decoration. Your sleeping mind reuses symbols only when something underneath stays unresolved. The number becomes a marker your unconscious keeps placing on the same unfinished thought, dream after dream, because your waking mind has been too busy to look at it directly. That is the surface layer. What this number is actually doing while you sleep goes 3 layers deeper, and the third layer is the one almost nobody explains. Why dreams are the one place. A signal cannot be ignored. During the day, you have defenses. You get busy. You scroll past a feeling before it finishes forming. You answer a message instead of sitting with the thought underneath it. Your waking mind is excellent at postponing anything uncomfortable, and most of the time it does this without you even noticing the postponement happening. Sleep removes that option. There is no phone to check in a dream, no task to hide behind. The parts of your brain that manage self-control and social filtering go quiet during REM sleep, while the parts that manage memory, emotion, and pattern recognition stay active. That is why dreams feel more honest than most of your waking thoughts. There is nothing left to perform for, and this is where most people misread what is happening to them. They assume a repeating number in a dream is either meaningless noise or a message being sent to them from somewhere outside themselves. It is neither. It is closer to a receipt. Your mind has been processing something specific night after night. It needed a symbol simple enough to survive the trip, simple enough to move from unconscious material into a dream image you would actually remember when you woke up. A number is perfect for that job. It has no face, no story, no emotional baggage of its own. It is a blank container your mind can fill with meaning and hand back to you in a form you cannot easily explain away. This is different from a normal dream forgetting itself by breakfast. Most dream content dissolves within minutes because it was your brain sorting ordinary information, images with no urgent signal attached. A detail that survives, that returns across dreams with completely different settings and different people, has been flagged as important by something in you that does not use language to make its case. Think about what that actually means. This number did not land on you by chance. Your own mind selected it. It attached the number to something unresolved. It has been repeating that choice deliberately, night after night until you finally sat up and paid attention. The way you are paying attention right now. The dreams did not start this. They are reporting on something that started earlier, somewhere in your waking life in a decision half made or a feeling half felt. The number is simply the only place that unfinished material has been able to reach you clearly enough to notice. What still needs answering is which number found you, and why this specific one kept choosing you over every other symbol available to your sleeping mind. That answer changes everything that follows. The number is 44444. Here is what it was doing in your sleep. The number is 44444. Say it out loud if you want. 4 fours, lined up in a row, showing up on a bedroom door that does not exist in your house, on a clock in a hallway you have never walked, on a page of a book with no title, different dreams. Same 4 digits. That repetition is the whole signal. In numerology, 4 is the number of structure. Walls, foundations, floors, the physical scaffolding that lets anything else stand upright. 1-4 is stability. 4 fours, repeated in sequence, is your mind insisting on that theme so heavily that it refuses to let the dream move on until you notice it. Here is where most people get the meaning wrong. They hear 4 fours and think angels, protection, some outside force watching over them while they sleep. That framing feels comforting, but it skips the actual mechanism. Your unconscious is not receiving a message from elsewhere. It is generating one from material you already carry. using the symbol that best fits what it needs to say. And what it needs to say right now is that something in your life feels structurally unstable, and part of you already knows it. Think about the last few months. A decision you have been avoiding finalizing. A version of your life that used to feel solid and now creaks under normal weight. A relationship, a job, a sense of who you are, something that used to hold its shape without effort and now takes constant maintenance just to stay upright. You may not have named this consciously. Your sleeping mind named it for you, in the only language it had available. 4/4 is not a warning that everything is collapsing. It is closer to an alarm from the part of you that builds things, telling you that the foundation needs attention before you keep adding floors on top of it. This is why the number kept returning instead of appearing once and fading. A single dream image gets forgotten by breakfast. A structural concern that has not been addressed does not resolve itself after one night of processing. It resurfaces, dream after dream, in whatever setting your mind happens to be using that particular night, because the underlying issue is still open. The surface meaning is now on the table. But naming the number was never the finish line. The deeper question is why your mind reached for structure specifically, why this symbol out of dozens available to it, and what that choice reveals about what you have actually been avoiding. What your brain does with a number while you sleep. While you sleep, your brain is not idle. It is sorting. The hippocampus, the part responsible for recent memory, replays fragments of your day at high speed, testing which details matter enough to move into longer-term storage and which ones can be discarded by morning. Most of what you experienced gets filed away without ceremony. A tiny fraction gets tagged as significant and held onto. That tagging is done partly by the amygdala, the region that attaches emotional weight to experience. It does not care whether something was pleasant or painful. It cares whether it mattered. And once something is tagged as mattering, your dreaming mind tends to return to it. It tests different angles, different symbols, different versions of the same unresolved material, until the emotional charge attached to it starts to settle. This is where the number becomes useful to you rather than mysterious. A number is one of the simplest images the brain can generate. It requires no face to render, no location to build, no plot to sustain. When your mind needs to mark something as unresolved without spending the processing effort of a full scene, a number is the cheapest, cleanest flag available. 4/4 on a door is far easier for a dreaming brain to produce. It is far simpler than an entire, emotionally accurate reconstruction of the actual situation underneath it. And this is the detail almost nobody talks about. The setting around the number changes every night specifically because the setting was never the point. One night it is a door. Another night it is a clock face refusing to move past the same digits. Another night it is scrawled across a page in handwriting that is not quite yours. Your mind is testing different containers for the same flagged content, searching for the version that will finally get your conscious attention. That is also why the number keeps returning instead of resolving after the first appearance. A flag stays raised until the situation underneath it changes, or until you consciously acknowledge what it is pointing at. Ignoring a strange dream once is easy. Ignoring the same signal for the 4th or 5th or 10th time takes active effort. That is precisely why you are watching this right now. You are not scrolling past it, the way you scrolled past the feeling in the first place. Your brain has done its part. It selected the number, attached the emotional weight, and kept resurfacing it with patience most people never give themselves credit for. What it cannot do on its own is finish the job. That part requires you to look directly at what the number has been standing in for, which is exactly where the next layer begins. The difference between a dream symbol and a repeating signal. Not every strange thing you dream about means something is trying to reach you. This matters. If every dream symbol carried significance, you would spend your life chasing meaning and random noise. The signals that actually deserve attention would get buried under the ones that do not. There is a real difference between ordinary dream content and a repeating signal, and it comes down to 3 things. The first is context variation, a single image appearing once in one setting, tied to something you clearly experienced that day, is usually just memory doing normal maintenance. But an image that follows you across dreams with nothing else in common, different rooms, different people, Different emotional tones, and only the number itself staying constant has stopped being incidental. Consistency across otherwise unrelated dreams is the first marker of a real signal. The second is emotional residue. Ordinary dream content fades within minutes of waking. You forget most of what you dreamed by the time you finish brushing your teeth. A true signal leaves something behind. A tightness, a sense of unfinished business you cannot immediately name. If you have been carrying a version of that feeling into your mornings for weeks, that persistence is the second marker. And this is where most people get the meaning wrong. They assume the strength of the feeling tells them how urgent the situation is. It does not. The strength of the feeling tells you how long the underlying material has been avoided, not how dangerous it is. A signal can feel intense simply because it has been ignored for months, not because anything catastrophic is unfolding. The third marker is resistance to explanation. You have probably already tried to explain the number away. Maybe you saw it on a receipt earlier that week, or it matches an old address, or it is simply a number you have always liked. If one of those explanations fully satisfied you, the number would stop returning. The fact that it keeps coming back after you have already tried to rationalize it tells you the rational explanation was not the real one. Put these three markers together, and you get a working test you can use for the rest of your life, not just for this number. Does it repeat across unrelated dreams? Does it leave emotional residue that survives into the morning? Does it keep returning even after you have tried to explain it away? If a symbol passes all three, it is not decoration. It is a flag your own mind placed there, and flags exist to be found, not admired from a distance. Your 4/4s pass every one of those tests, which means the next question is not whether this is real. It already answered that. The next question is what it has been standing guard over. Why 44444 feels like structure, even when everything else feels unstable. Look at the shape of the number itself for a moment. 4/4s, identical, evenly spaced, repeating without variation. There is no digit competing for attention, no irregular rhythm to interpret. It is the most symmetrical, most orderly sequence your mind could have chosen, and that is not an accident. When a system is under stress, it reaches for order wherever it can find it. A person who feels emotionally scattered will often clean an entire kitchen at midnight. Not because the kitchen was urgent, because control over one small, contained thing feels steadying when the larger picture will not hold still. Your dreaming mind does the same thing with symbols. Faced with something unresolved and shapeless, it reached for the most rigid, repeatable, structurally perfect number available to represent the opposite of what you have been feeling. This is the part that usually gets missed. The number is not describing your current state. It is describing what your mind is reaching toward. 4/4s is not a picture of collapse. It is a picture of the scaffolding your unconscious wants to build underneath whatever currently feels shaky. That distinction changes how you should read every dream where it appears. You are not watching yourself fall apart. You are watching a part of you actively construct stability, piece by piece, night after night, whether or not your waking mind has agreed to participate yet. Think about what has felt structurally uncertain in your life recently. Not catastrophic, necessarily. Just less solid than it used to be. A routine that used to anchor your days now feels optional. A relationship that used to have clear footing now requires constant renegotiation. A sense of identity, of knowing who you are in a room, that used to arrive automatically and now takes effort to locate. None of that has to be dramatic to qualify. Most structural instability is quiet. It shows up as low-grade fatigue, as a vague sense that you are improvising more of your life than you used to, as small decisions that suddenly feel heavier than they should. Your waking mind is skilled at absorbing that quietly without naming it. Your dreaming mind is not nearly as patient. 4/4s, then, is less a warning and more an instruction. It is your own psyche telling you, in the clearest symbolic language it had, that the next move is not more improvisation. The next move is foundation work, even if that foundation work is small, even if it is just one honest decision you have been circling for weeks. What remains to be seen is where this number physically showed up across your different dreams, because the setting it chose each time carries its own layer of meaning, separate from the number itself. The nights it shows up on clocks, doors, and pages. If the number only appeared on a clock, this would be a simpler conversation. But it does not stay in one place. It moves through your dreams the way a message moves through different messengers, and each surface it lands on adds a layer the number alone does not carry. A clock reads 4444, or the digits arrange themselves that way even though clocks do not usually work like that and the dream does not correct itself. This version is about time, not urgency exactly, more a question of timing. Something you have been waiting to do until the moment feels right. Your mind, through the clock, is suggesting the moment has already arrived and you are the one still waiting for permission. A door with the number on it is a different message entirely. Doors are thresholds. They mark the difference between one room and the next, one phase and the next. A door numbered 4444 is not telling you time is passing. It is telling you a transition is available, right there, and you have been standing in front of it rather than opening it. The dream is not vague about this. It puts the threshold directly in front of you and waits to see whether you reach for the handle. And this is the setting most people misread completely. They assume the door means something external, a literal opportunity, a job, a relationship, a move. Sometimes it does. More often, it represents an internal threshold, a version of yourself on the other side that requires you to stop being the person you have been in order to become it. The door is patient. It has appeared more than once because you have not opened it yet, not because it is going anywhere. Then there is the page. A number written across a page in a book with no title is the most symbolically dense of the three, because pages represent narrative, the story you are telling yourself about your own life. A page marked 4444 suggests you are close to a natural break, a place where one part of your story could end cleanly and another could begin, if you let it. Different nights, different surfaces, one consistent number. Clock, door, page, timing, threshold, narrative. Your mind has been circling the same underlying situation from three separate angles, testing which framing would finally land clearly enough for you to act on it. Which surface has appeared most often in your own dreams matters less than the pattern underneath all three. Timing, threshold, and story are not separate concerns. They are three descriptions of a single moment your unconscious believes has already arrived. The next layer explains something else entirely. Why your mind chose to frame all of this as a decoding problem instead of simply telling you directly. What Carl Jung would say about a number that follows you into sleep. Carl Jung spent decades studying dreams that repeat, and he noticed something specific about the ones that carry numbers. He believed numbers were not just quantities, they were archetypes, patterns so basic to the structure of the mind that they show up the same way across cultures that never had contact with each other. 4, in particular, kept appearing across his case studies as a symbol of wholeness, of a psychological structure finally becoming complete. He called the process behind this individuation, the slow, often uncomfortable work of integrating the parts of yourself you have kept separate, the parts you show at work and the parts you only let out at midnight, the parts you have accepted and the parts you have spent years managing quietly in the background. Jung believed the unconscious does not stay silent during this process. It comments. It repeats symbols. It escalates the repetition specifically when the conscious mind keeps failing to notice. This is where his theory becomes useful for what has been happening to you. Jung also described something he called compensation, the idea that dreams often present the opposite of your conscious attitude, correcting a one-sided view you have been carrying without realizing it. If your waking life has felt increasingly improvised, ungrounded, reactive, your unconscious may be compensating. It hands you the most structured, most orderly number it has access to, again and again, until the imbalance gets your attention. And this is the detail that separates his framework from generic spiritual language. Jung was not describing a mystical force sending you messages from outside. He was describing a psychological function, internal, self-generated, purposeful. The unconscious in his model is not passive storage. It is closer to a second mind working in parallel with your conscious one. It uses symbols the way your conscious mind uses words, deliberately to make a point it cannot make any other way. He also wrote about synchronicity, Meaningful coincidence without a direct causal link. But he was careful to separate synchronicity from randomness. A coincidence becomes meaningful, in his framework, specifically when it lines up with something already active in the unconscious. Which means the number appearing in your dreams and the number occasionally catching your eye during the day are not two separate mysteries. They are the same signal, surfacing through two different channels because one channel alone was not getting through. Jung would not tell you the number is magic. He would tell you it is evidence. Evidence that a part of your own psyche has been trying to complete something, insistently, patiently, using the clearest symbolic language available to it. What remains is understanding what exactly that part of you has been building toward. The part of you that built this pattern without asking permission. Somewhere inside you, a decision was made without your conscious input. A part of your mind chose 4 4s, chose to repeat it across clocks and doors and pages, chose to keep escalating until you finally sat down to make sense of it. You did not authorize any of that. It happened the way your heartbeat happens, automatically, without waiting for permission. This is worth sitting with for a moment, because it says something about how much of you operates outside your own awareness. You like to think of yourself as the author of your life, choosing your reactions, deciding your direction. Most of the time that feels true, at least on the surface. But there is another part running underneath the one you present to the world. Older in some ways, less interested in social performance, far more interested in whether the actual structure of your life holds together. That part does not ask before it acts. It builds patterns, tests them, repeats what works, and it has apparently decided that 4 4s, repeated relentlessly, was the most effective way to reach you. And this is where most people flinch instead of leaning in. They find it unsettling that something inside them can act without consulting the conscious self they identify with. It feels like evidence of being out of control. But consider the alternative. If nothing in you operated below conscious awareness, you would have to manually manage your heartbeat, your digestion, your immune response, every process required to keep you alive. The unconscious is not a threat to your autonomy. It is the infrastructure that makes autonomy possible in the first place. The part of you that built this pattern is not a stranger. It is the same part that keeps you breathing evenly through a stressful meeting. The same part that flinches you away from danger before your conscious mind even registers a threat. It has simply turned its attention, this time, towards something structural in your waking life that needs the same kind of protective urgency. That reframes the entire experience. You are not being haunted by a mysterious external force. You are being managed carefully and persistently by the most competent part of your own mind, the part that has kept you functioning your entire life without ever asking for credit. The question this raises is not whether to trust that part of yourself. You already do, every time you fall asleep and wake up again the next morning. The real question is why it chose this exact moment to escalate its methods, and what that timing reveals about what has actually been building in your waking life while you were busy not noticing. Why the same number refuses to change, even when the dream does. Most dream content drifts. A face becomes a different face halfway through. A house rearranges its own rooms without anyone noticing the inconsistency. Dreams are famous for this kind of instability, because the mind generating them is not concerned with continuity the way a film director would be. It is concerned with emotional logic, not physical accuracy, which makes the number's refusal to change genuinely unusual. Everything else in these dreams has been free to shift. The setting, the people, the tone, sometimes even the rules of physics. The number alone has stayed fixed. 4 4s, exactly as they were the first time. No drift, no variation, appearing again with the same precision as before. That consistency is doing a specific job. When something in a dream refuses to change while everything around it keeps shifting, it usually means the underlying issue has not changed either. Dreams are willing to update details freely, because most details are disposable. They are not willing to update a symbol that is still accurately representing something real. The number stays fixed because the situation it points to is still open, still waiting, still exactly as unresolved as it was the first night it appeared. And this is where most people misread the persistence as a threat. They start to feel almost pursued by the repetition, as though the dream is punishing them for not understanding sooner. It is not punishment. It is patience. Your mind is not escalating out of frustration. It is simply continuing to flag something honestly, the same way a smoke detector does not stop beeping out of malice. It stops when the actual condition triggering it changes. Consider what would happen if you addressed the underlying situation, even partially. Numerology and dream research both point toward the same pattern here. Once the corresponding waking life issue receives real attention, even in a small, incomplete way, the symbol representing it in dreams typically softens. It might not vanish immediately, but the intensity usually decreases. The frequency usually spaces out because the flag no longer needs to work as hard to get your attention. This means the number is not fixed because your fate is fixed. It is fixed because your response has been fixed. You have been offering the same non-response night after night, and the signal has simply been matching that consistency with its own. The fixed nature of 4/4s is not a life sentence. It is closer to a mirror, showing you exactly how long you have been giving the same answer to a question that has actually been waiting for a different one. What happens the night you finally understand it? People who work with recurring dream symbols describe a specific moment, the night the dream finally changes shape. Not because anything external happened, because something internal shifted first, usually a small honest acknowledgement made during waking hours, and the dream simply reflected that shift back. Here is roughly how it tends to unfold. The number still appears, at least once more, but the setting around it changes in a way that feels different from before. A door that used to stay closed might finally open. A clock that used to freeze on the same digits might move past them. A page that used to be blank underneath the number might suddenly have a sentence written on it, one you can actually read. This is not the unconscious rewarding you for good behavior. It is simply reporting an updated status. The flag was raised because something was unresolved. Once you engage with it honestly, even partially, the situation it was flagging has technically changed. The dream content updates to match the new reality, the same way it updated to match the old one. And this is where most people expect too much too fast. They assume understanding the number should end the dreams immediately, like flipping a switch. It rarely works that way. Psychological material tends to resolve in layers, not all at once. You might notice the dream softening gradually, the number appearing less frequently, the emotional charge around it lightening, before it stops appearing altogether. That gradual fade is not the process failing. It is the process working exactly as it should. What actually needs to happen on your end is smaller than people expect. You do not need a dramatic life overhaul the moment you understand what the number has been pointing toward. You need one honest decision, one overdue conversation, one small structural change that acknowledges the instability your mind has been flagging. The dream is not asking for perfection. It is asking for participation. There is also a particular kind of morning that tends to follow this shift. The morning where you wake up and realize you did not check the clock first, out of habit, expecting to see 4/4s staring back at you. That absence, the ordinary boredom of a clock that simply tells you the time, is often the clearest sign the signal has done its job. None of this requires you to solve everything about your life tonight. It requires you to stop treating the number as background noise and start treating it as information, which, if you have made it this far, you have already begun doing. The difference between waking up changed and waking up the same. There is a quiet trap available right now, and it is worth naming directly. You can understand everything explained so far, not along with every piece of it, feel a rush of recognition at how accurately it describes your situation, and still wake up tomorrow morning having changed nothing at all. Insight and integration are not the same event. Insight is the moment the pattern becomes visible. Integration is what happens afterward, when you actually let that visibility change a decision. Most people stop at insight because it is genuinely satisfying on its own. It feels like progress. It produces relief. But relief without action tends to fade within days. And the underlying issue the number has been flagging remains exactly where it was. This is the difference between waking up changed and waking up the same. Waking up changed does not require a dramatic transformation. It requires one specific, concrete acknowledgement carried into the next day. Naming, out loud or on paper, the actual structural instability the dream has been circling. Not a vague sense that something feels off, but the precise thing. The relationship you have been avoiding a real conversation about. The work situation you have outgrown, but have not admitted yet. The version of yourself you have been postponing becoming because the current version is more familiar. And this is where most people quietly talk themselves out of the work. They tell themselves understanding the symbolism was the assignment, that decoding the number was the whole point. And now that it has been decoded, the job is finished. But a flag that has been understood and then ignored anyway tends to keep flying. Your mind did not repeat this number for weeks just so you could enjoy a satisfying explanation of it. It repeated the number because it wanted the underlying situation addressed. Waking up the same looks like this instead. The dreams fade briefly out of sheer fatigue, the mind moving on to other material for a while. Then, months later, a new symbol starts repeating, carrying the exact same underlying message in a different costume. The unconscious is patient, but it is not infinitely patient with being understood and then set aside. You do not need to fix everything tonight. You need to choose one honest action this week that treats the structural instability as real instead of theoretical. That single choice is the difference between the number becoming a story you tell about a strange month of dreams and the number becoming the moment you actually change direction. Why this number chose repetition instead of a single message. It would have been simpler, in theory, for your mind to hand you one vivid dream, a single unmistakable scene that explained everything at once and never needed to repeat itself. That is not what happened. Instead, you got fragments spread across weeks, the same 4 digits recurring in different settings, none of them a complete explanation on its own. There is a reason repetition was chosen over a single dramatic message, and it has to do with how change actually works, as opposed to how people wish it worked. A single overwhelming dream is easy to dismiss the next morning. It can be filed away as unusually vivid, unusual because of something you ate, unusual because of stress, and forgotten within a week. Repetition does not offer that exit. Each new appearance makes the previous ones harder to write off as coincidence, until the pattern itself becomes the argument, more persuasive than any single image could have been alone. This mirrors something true about how real psychological change tends to happen. It rarely arrives as one clean insight that instantly rewires a person. It arrives in passes, the same lesson circling back in slightly different form until it finally lands with enough weight to produce an actual decision. 4 fours, repeated across nights, is not an inefficient way to deliver a message. It is the only way that particular kind of message tends to actually work. And this is the layer that ties back to the number itself. 4 repeated 4 times is not simply 4 multiplied for emphasis. In numerology, repeating a digit is traditionally read as amplification, the base meaning of the number turned up rather than changed. A single 4 already represents structure and foundation. 4 fours takes that same message and insists on it, refuses to let it be treated as optional, repeats the point until it cannot reasonably be missed. Your mind, in other words, selected not just the right number but the right intensity of that number, calibrated specifically to overcome however much you had been avoiding the underlying issue. A milder signal might have worked for someone who was only mildly avoiding something. You got the amplified version because the avoidance, whatever it has actually been about, has apparently been substantial enough to require it. There is nothing punishing in that calibration. It is closer to being taken seriously by your own mind, treated as someone capable of eventually hearing the message, rather than someone who needed to be left alone with an easier symbol. The repetition was respect, disguised as persistence. The layer beneath 4444 that has nothing to do with luck. Most explanations of angel numbers stop at the surface. Good fortune is coming. Protection is near. Some cosmic force out there has noticed you. Those framings are comforting, and they are also in this case beside the point because 4444 was never functioning as luck. Luck implies something arriving from outside, something you receive passively. What has actually been happening is closer to the opposite. Here is the layer almost nobody names directly, The number did not appear because something good is about to happen to you. It appeared because a decision has already been made somewhere inside you, quietly, before your conscious mind caught up to it. The repetition is not a countdown to an external event. It is confirmation that the internal work, the actual decision about the structural instability you have been circling, is further along than you have given yourself credit for. This reframes everything that came before it. You have spent this video learning that your unconscious flags unresolved material, that it selects symbols carefully, that it repeats them with calibrated intensity until you notice. All of that was true. But underneath the flagging is something quieter and more significant. A part of you already knows what needs to change. Not vaguely, not abstractly, specifically. The dreams have not been asking you to figure something out from scratch. They have been asking you to stop overriding an answer you already reached. This is the part that has nothing to do with luck and everything to do with self-trust. Most people spend years assuming the answer to their uncertainty lives somewhere outside them, in more information, more advice, more signs to interpret. The truth, uncomfortable and freeing at once, is that the answer has usually already arrived. It arrived the night the number first appeared, fully formed, and every repetition since then has simply been your own mind waiting for you to stop pretending you had not heard it. You are not waiting for 44444 to deliver good news. You are the one holding the news, and the number has just been the messenger patient enough to keep knocking until you open the door yourself. This is what makes the ending of this pattern different from a wish granted. It is not luck arriving. It is you, catching up to a decision you already made. Somewhere quiet enough that it took weeks of repeated symbols to reach the part of you that gets to act on it. Once you see this clearly, the number stops feeling mysterious and starts feeling almost practical. Less a sign from beyond, more a note you left for yourself, written in the only language guaranteed to survive the trip from sleep into waking life. What comes after the dreams stop? There will be a night eventually when you go to sleep and nothing marks itself with 4 fours. No door, no clock, no page. You may not even notice it happening in real time. You will simply realize, days later, that you cannot remember the last time you saw the number. And the realization will arrive quietly, without fanfare, the way most real resolutions actually do. This is worth preparing for, because it rarely feels the way people expect. There is no dramatic final dream where everything gets tied together with perfect clarity. Psychological material does not usually end with a bow. It ends with absence. The signal simply stops needing to fire because the thing it was flagging has been addressed, even partially, even imperfectly, enough that the flag can finally come down. What replaces it is not a new symbol demanding equal attention. It is closer to ordinary sleep, dreams that dissolve by breakfast the way most dreams always have. Nothing insisting on being remembered because nothing urgent remains unresolved. That ordinariness is not a loss. It is the entire point. The number was never meant to become a permanent companion. It was meant to work itself out of a job. And this is where the emotional shift tends to land hardest. Somewhere in the weeks this has been unfolding, you likely started to feel a strange intimacy with the number, almost a relationship with it, checking for it, half expecting it, occasionally missing its presence on the mornings it did not appear. That attachment is understandable. It kept you company through something you were working out alone. But its job was never to stay. Its job was to get you here, to this exact recognition, and then step aside. What comes after is not emptiness. It is the structure you were missing, quietly rebuilt, foundation by foundation, in the parts of your waking life that had gone shaky. The stability the number represented all along stops being a symbol you dream about and starts being a condition you actually live inside. That is the real transfer this entire pattern was engineered to accomplish, moving the 4 fours out of your sleep and into your days, where it was always meant to live. You did not need some outside force to send you a sign. You needed your own mind to get loud enough, patient enough, and specific enough that you finally listened. It found a way. 4 digits, repeated until you understood them, was never luck. It was you, reaching yourself, the only way that message could travel and actually arrive intact.